The red chip invasion of the Shalank was not a pleasant encounter for anybody. The Shalank, a very humanoid-looking species, if you don't count the lime-green skin, the reptilian eyes, the 10% larger size compared to the average human, the 6 digits on each upper hand, and, of course, the taloned feet that seem as though they're walking up on their toes. Aside from that, yeah, sure, they look human. Their technology level at the time of the invasion was approximately post-World War II, at least by human understandings. Yet they refused to create any type of nuclear ordnance or power. A single command from their king had actually created a free energy state, which was elevating them very quickly. Unfortunately, this did not aid them in their fighting against the red chip. This mammalian species is nearly a dead ringer for the Yeti or Sasquatch of human legend. Tall, hairy, strong, and genuinely angry, they arrived without warning and began to take anything they desired. Primarily, this was centered around massive mines that destroyed much of the ecosystem for several dozen kilometers in any directions, and ended up poisoning everything with the disruption and waste that was dumped everywhere, especially when it came to any body of water. This would grab any waste, any toxin, and drag it down, destroying anything inside the river or next to it. In response, the Shalank fought back. They fought very bravely, and they died very quickly. As they fell by the hundreds, the Shalank did achieve their goals, which was the destruction of the mines. They destroyed equipment, and as soon as it was broken, they dropped it down the shaft. Mostly, they destroyed equipment by taking out the legs, the support structures, and making the equipment itself tumble down into the shaft itself, falling hundreds, sometimes thousands of meters down to the bottom. The equipment would reach the bottom, tumbling along with all the rubble, would pile up, explode, or simply burst into flames on the way down. If they were lucky, it would collapse the mine entirely, slowing down all the ore removal, and eventually making these mines completely useless, or, at the very least, unprofitable. However, in response from the red chip, well, one would say that it was horrific. It turned into a genocidal campaign of everyone at arms or capable of bearing them. Every able-bodied male, adult or child, was either killed in the fighting or executed in front of all eyes, especially those that were related to it. Using their superior size and power, the red chip would tear into buildings and reach out, grabbing anyone, any male that was there. It didn't matter the age. Even down to the infants were taken, as none were spared. Some were stabbed, some were shot, some were torn in half, and some were eaten in front of the others as they watched. Some even were burned to death very slowly. The screams of those being tortured, the screams of those watching echoed across the world. Screams of fear, screams of agony, screams of loss, screams of horror, screams that seemed to delight the red chip to no end, making them want to cause even more screams. The screams of the populace reached up all the way to the exosphere, but in space, everyone knows, no one can hear you scream. Yet, to the Shalank, this didn't matter. They didn't have the technology to reach out and call for help to anyone anyway. So their screams would end up fading into nothing, and they knew it. As the screams subdued, replaced by the holding back of tears, the red chip finally left. No prisoners were taken. This was due to the idea of a Shalank servant was almost as disgusting to the red chip as a Shalank concubine. The red chip would look and think in disgust at the smooth skin alone, as it's enough to dissuade most. But there was also the eyes, and the extra digits kept most from even considering any form of physical violation. The Shellac world is now in ruin. Their labor force, pretty much gone. Their food producers are just gone. Most of their best minds are gone. Either they're dead or they're completely broken after what they experienced. Many wondered how they would even survive. They tried to harden themselves and make sure that they could survive, scrounging for anything they could find. Many would end up falling to the ground, falling dead to poor hygiene, starvation, or fighting over what little food they still could scavenge together. Many had gone fully feral, and for over half a year they suffered. They lost even more. They didn't think that their suffering could be any worse. Upon seeing ships arriving, they all believed that the red ship had returned to finish the job, to finish them all off, and many were glad of it. They believed that their suffering would finally end. Some, even as though they were in a trance, walked out in their tattered clothing and opened their arms and wait for the ship coming down to fire on them. The ships, these strange flying bricks, began to land randomly across the planet. They didn't fire, not a one. Not a single weapon system was even exposed, nor did they make much sound compared to the red ship ships. They were silent, silent as the grave as they carefully approached, and since they made no noise, some thought that they were just hallucinating. On the personal space vessel, a frigate-class cargo ship called the Shine in the Dark, a single person stands on the bridge. Slowly, he commands the ship to lower it down, landing it very softly on the struts to the point where it doesn't even seem to make a sound as it touches. Once everything begins to cool, he opens the cargo hold doors and extends the ramp, which does make a sound as it strikes the ground. Then he walks down in his armor. It isn't a full body armor, but instead a light exosuit that seems to be strapped on the outside of his clothes, allowing him for full movement. However, it does allow him to be much, much stronger. He looks around slowly as the robots of his crew begin to disembark, moving just as fluently as any human. They begin to scan the area, all of them spreading out, looking for something. It isn't long until the man hears the ping in his HUD and goes to see what the biosensors had found. Walking over, he checks the sensor data. Whatever it is around here, or whatever thing is around here, their bio readouts are barely reading. What is this? He thinks to himself. As he gets to a partially collapsed building, he prepares an energy shield in his left arm, holding in front, and he pushes the door open, but the door doesn't open. The door falls open, and he steps over it to walk in. He continues to follow the sensors as the robots are behind him. He follows the sensors, walking upstairs, and when he reaches to the top, he checks his sensors again, turns, and sees the doorway to a room. He walks and turns into this large room, and that is where he sees it, or more accurately, sees them. In the far corner of the room, huddled together behind a makeshift barrier, he could see 2 adults, 3 adolescents that to his eyes looked maybe teenage, maybe possibly 20 years old, and 2 young children that couldn't be more, at least to human eyes, more than 2 to 4 years old. At least that is what it looked like to his human eyes. He looked around, keeping his shield up, as he and his robots began to clear the area. They checked every room, every closet, except that one corner. Once they were finished, he told the robots to hold, and he walked towards the group as they huddled in the corner, just staring at him and staring at his bots. In desperation, one of the adults threw something at him, and it impacted the shield and barely even registered the strike. Normally, when the shield is struck, it shudders. Depending on how strong the strike is, it will actually flicker. This one didn't even show anything. Seeing that it was only females, and that they're so weak that even the throw seemed to exhaust the female that threw it, as she simply started breathing heavy, he looked to his arm, deactivated the shield, didn't even take one more step forward as he took a knee. He began to give an order to his robots, and they all turn and leave, leaving him alone in there with the young ones. He then reaches into one of his pouches, pulls out a high caloric bar. Normally, one of these bars, which isn't much bigger than 2 fingers, well, wider than 2 fingers and about as long as your hand, can be a full meal supplement. You only need 3 of these a day, and you're going to be running on high octane, as this thing is extremely calorically dense and breaks down very slowly in the body. So he realizes that holding it out seems to make them pull back a little bit. So he places the bar down, pulls out one of his blades, which again makes all the females nervous. He raises his other hand in a motion of try to calm down, please. He then begins to cut the bar into very, very small pieces, as small as he can. Then puts the blade away, making sure to show exactly how he snaps it shut to make sure that they know that the blade is not coming back out. He then gathers up the small pieces in his hands and holds them out as far as he can, holds them out for the females to eat. The Shalak are suspicious at every single movement, but feel suddenly as this thing, this creature they've never seen before, looks at them. They feel a sense of calm coming from this strange bipedal creature. It's as though they can feel all their fear, all their apprehension, all their worry just going away. They slowly reach out and take the pieces of the bar, hand them out to everybody. Hesitantly, they look at it, they smell, they look at it, realizing it doesn't have much of a taste, and then consume it. And then they all begin to feel much better with just a few moments, as the bar itself immediately begins to break down into their stomach, flooding their bodies with nutrients and calories. Their eyes widen in surprise as they realize that they are not going to be treated poorly. The man sees this, tries not to smile, and stands up, and then motions for them to join him, to follow him. Slowly, they rise up and they follow, trying to say something to this bipedal creature that just fed them, saying many things, many thanks as they walk. As they reach the broken door, the biped pauses for a second, realizing that the busted door is actually going to get in their way, then reaches down and effortlessly clears the way, the exosuit allowing him a huge show of strength as he one arm throws the door not just to the side, but out the front of the house as though it's nothing. He then walks through and motions them to follow. Once in the sunlight, the locals look at the strange ship, this huge, strange block of metal. It gives them pause, but not nearly as much, as they realize that just outside the edge of the ramp are multiple robots setting up tables and chairs. On one long set of tables, they can see that something is being set out. They weren't sure at first what it was. Then they could smell it. And the smell alone was almost enough to lift them up by the nose and drift them over towards the table. And the smell alone is enough to get the children running straight towards the food. The only thing to eat at the moment, however, is a rather rich soup. It's a bit light, as they want to sit there and gorge on something hearty, but enough to put some calories in their systems besides just a bite of one of those caloric bars. Yet for them, This is going to be the first hot food in months, and they are not going to complain. Small rolls are actually given as they all reach for the second bowl, which they immediately devour. As they do, they carry on a conversation. The elders, if you could call them that, as to human eyes they barely look like they're 30, try in vain to slow the young ones down to make sure they don't eat too fast. However, they do fail as one child vomits from eating too fast, yet is still ready to eat more and more, immediately running over for another bowl of soup. As they enjoy this, they don't even really notice that the robots are always around. There's always one close. Though, when they do realize this, it's a bit upsetting, but this doesn't stop anyone from eating. After searching the surrounding area again, the human makes his appearance once more around these survivors as they eat. He seems to pay them no mind as he's totally engrossed in his datapad and hardly even looks up. When he does, the two elders are looking directly at him. They know that look, a look that says no survivors. Yet without any warning, he suddenly raises his head up as though he hears something, and then turns sharply in one direction and takes off at full sprint. This confuses everyone looking, but they don't know what he's doing. A few minutes later, he comes back with a young woman in his arms, running at full speed again. She appears to be unconscious as her arms and legs are swinging limp as he's running past. Without a word or even a look, he charges right up the ramp and into the ship. Many of those who've seen were confused. They didn't know. Did he find a body? Is he able to save anyone? They didn't know there was other survivors. They begin to talk amongst each other more and more, trying to figure out what is going on. One of the older Shellac is curious and heads towards the ship, but as she does, a robot stops her and speaks in her language. Pause. Passage given. No. Captain. These words surprise everyone, and they're all seemingly looking, and it only takes a moment to realize that the robots have been figuring out their language as they've been speaking. She starts to ask the robot questions. She wants to know what the human is doing with that woman, and the only thing she got was that same robotic voice saying, repair. That's all she got. Repair. She wasn't sure if she understood it right, if some of the idioms were being lost. She didn't get why someone would repair a person like a ship. But she decided not to fight this robot. It is one of her saviors, after all. It is another hour before she sees the human step out looking mentally spent, not knowing what's going on. He just kind of stands there, letting the evening sun start to strike him on the face as he takes a deep breath and look up. The women all look up at him as the children have fallen asleep after eating such a meal. He then looks down and looks them in the eye and begins to raise the edges of his mouth. For a moment, they're scared. They think this creature will begin to bare its teeth or something. That is until they realize that this gesture is actually a gesture of joy and happiness, as he seems to make a strange motion with his head, bringing it up and down in a slight motion. And it seems as though he's giving orders to the robots too. He doesn't seem discouraged, so it seems as though things went well. The man walks to them. This time, they do not shrink in fear from him, as they realize that he didn't come to harm them. Then this creature spoke in its own language, and it takes this moment before the translator actually comes in their own language. And what they hear is, enough, consume. Then he motions for one of the robots to grab something, and the robot immediately grabs a blanket for those around the small fire that are simply laying on the blankets instead of under them. The same adult female Shellac that had tried to actually walk into his ship asked him about her friend as she realized that she had remembered who that was. After the translation, she heard, resting, time to repair, heal. She thanks him and then asks, why? Why did they come here? Why are you helping us? It takes a few seconds for the translator to work, and it seems though the human was trying to actually move things around in his head. Then he spoke, and the translator said, "We humans live long now. We learn to listen. We can hear through distance, even our planet." He then reaches over to his right arm and actually punches a couple buttons. That extends a holomap up, which is actually a star map, which has both her world and his clearly marked and shows the distance between the two worlds. She's aghast at this, and she asked, how is it possible for you to hear us? Because in space, no one can hear you talk, scream, send a message. We don't even have the technology for this. She has to pause and remind herself that he's listening through a translator, one that's having trouble with her own language, but it's getting better. He listens closely, responds, and then hears, "When humans listen, we can hear your soul scream." He then reaches out with his hand and places it on the head of a sleeping child, a child that is right now resting comfortably with a full belly next to a roaring fire. He then grabs the blanket and pulls it over top of the child. The translator then speaks again. "The soul, quiet now." The man simply moves his hand from the child to the woman's cheek. She hesitates for a little bit and then realizes that his hand is warm and soft to the touch. She then leans into the hand just a little bit. Then she hears the translator again. "Your soul screams no more. Needs release." The female looks surprised at this, not knowing exactly what he was speaking of. She turned to the other adult female that was still awake. Actually, those two were the only two still awake, and they were a bit confused as they began to ask, "Release for what?" Then turned to the human and asked the same question. "What does he mean, release? Release from what?" "Pain, loss, grieve." He then pauses and moves forward and slowly wraps his arm around both of them, one at a time, not high enough to be around the neck, but enough around the torso. He then pulls them close in a very light hug. "Let go." In that moment, both women can feel the warmth of this human reaching them. It's almost as though not only his bioenergy, not only his heat was reaching them to comfort them, but it seems as though he was reaching out with his mind, trying to tell them to let go. They didn't realize that they had been holding everything back, trying to stay strong for the young ones, and like a tsunami crashing into a dam, the dam broke, and they began to cry into his shoulders, breaking into full-on sobs for several minutes, trying to cover the sounds of their tears and their cries as they buried themselves into his chest, sometimes having to turn as the mechanical exosuit is not always fun to press against. However, the musculature of this creature is soft and strong and firm all at the same time. It's enough that they can get everything out in that moment. Once they're done, they begin to pull away, seemingly motioning that they're good. The man then pulls back, speaks into his translator, and then they hear, "Sleep now. I got you." Then he grabs another blanket from the robots that brought it, handed it back to these women who had actually surrendered their blankets to the young ones, and wrapped them up, and then motioned them to get next to the fire. He then, as they start to drift away rather quickly, he puts a few pieces of wood on the fire, and as the fire sparks and burns, he looks up to the sky. That is when the hate and rage And this man's heart is swelling up inside him. He can feel the hate flow through him, and not only him, but all the humans that had come to this planet to help. As they looked into the night sky, they all locked onto a single point. Every single one of them had seen all the memory sticks that they could find. They knew what that other species had done, how cruel they had been, and how they delighted in the massacre, not only of the men, but the children as well. A line that is never to be crossed. In the vastness of space, there is a furry species that fancies themselves greater than all. They believe themselves to be almost godlike. Even if they were to meet a human, they would believe themselves above human, believe that everyone is below them. However, in that moment, every single one of their species felt a very human chill crawl up their spines. They don't understand it. It's a primordial fear everyone has as they know that a predator has just locked onto them. They can't see the predator, but they can feel it deep into their own souls. Something is looking for them, and something is really, really pissed off. Hello everybody, this is Syntax. Thank you so much for joining me today on this short story. Now, before I go, I do have a couple quick things to say, and the first is, today's winner has been Chris Johnson 6845. I also have to send out a giant thank you to the supporters of the channel, and those will be Sir Prozac and Pancakes, Brian Kemp, SS Demon, MTF Guard, Guardian Sage, Erica Gem, Julius Boone, and Jan Yeager. Thank you all so much for supporting the channel. Everybody else, I'll see you on the next one. This is Syntax, punching out.